So a while back, I made a video on Resident Evil Survivor, the first of the Gun Survivor series from my one and only love, Capcom, with the purpose of finding out if it is indeed the worst Resident Evil game, and after playing it for myself, I came to the conclusion that the game might actually be the worst one I've played. Despite this, I still enjoyed it quite a bit. Not because it's a good game, because it isn't, but how everything about it is absolutely stupid. It gave me quite a few laughs, and to that I say good job. After I uploaded the video, Marie, a fellow dolphin enthusiast, let me know that Resident Evil Survivor 2 is somehow even worse than the first game. And they're kinda right. It's not particularly bad, so much that it's just not a fun game to play. Capcom pretty much took the idea of an arcade-like Resident Evil from Survivor 1 and ran with it for the second game, even going as far as working with Namco to make it an arcade exclusive until it was eventually ported to the PlayStation 2, but only in Europe and Japan. Capcom knew nobody wanted to see that shit over here in North America. It's a soulless game in my opinion. You pretty much just run around shooting zombies in a first-person reimagining of Resident Evil Code Veronica. There's a time limit to get to the end of the level, and if you don't make it in time, Nemesis chases you for some reason. I promise you it sounds way cooler than it actually is. In reality, this game is super boring. It's okay for a level or two at a time, but I can't actually see myself finishing this game. But it does have a hefty helping of Steve, so that's always nice. After Resident Evil Survivor 2 became a thing, Capcom decided to make a third Gun Survivor game, and instead of it being another Resident Evil spin-off, they went with a different franchise. Gun Survivor 3, or Dino Stalker, is more or less the same game but with dinosaurs instead of zombies. Talk about deja vu. From the little bit of footage I've watched, it seems like they made some improvements over the last game. Maybe. If only that was enough to make me interested in buying it. After a string of mediocre games that no one really cared about, the fourth and final Gun Survivor game began its development. It would appear that Capcom had bigger and better things to focus on at the time, such as Resident Evil 4's lengthy development and a different spin-off game, Resident Evil Outbreak. So the game got passed off to Cavia, a studio that prior to this had only released some One Piece game and dramatic soccer game. The only soccer game where you get to read what's happening instead of playing it. Later on, Cavia would go on to develop the first two Drakengard games, Nier and the Resident Evil Chronicles duology, which I heard were pretty good but have never played. With Resident Evil Survivor leaving a sour taste in the mouth of North Americans, being the reason why the second game was never released here, and the third not being called Dino Crisis Survivor or something stupid like that, Capcom thought it would be a great idea to not give this new game the Survivor moniker, and thus Resident Evil Dead Aim was born. So Dead Aim takes place 4 years after the Raccoon City incident where there was a T-virus outbreak, leaving the city overrun with zombies and big, beefy mutant men. The city was blown up due to some super secret government reasons, you know, conspiracies and shit. Fast forward a few years and a terrorist organization broke into Umbrella's Paris labs and stole the T-virus, which they used to infect a giant Umbrella ocean liner and threaten to launch T-virus warheads at the USA and China unless they get $1 billion. US Stratcom sends in everyone's favorite cowboy, Bruce McGivern, from their anti-Umbrella pursuit and investigation team, or OPIT. No one calls it that. Unfortunately, as soon as he makes his way onto the ship, he gets caught by the head terrorist. Before being executed, Bruce is saved by a mysterious woman with a hand grenade, which gives him enough time to escape. It is soon revealed that this woman is Fong Ling, an agent sent from China to disarm the missiles and take care of the terrorist group. Throughout the game, the player will run into Fong Ling several times, and it's at these times where you get to learn more about their personalities and their character dynamic. Bruce is an extremely flirtatious southern man who never passes on a chance to sweet-talk a lady who's caught his eye, and Fong Ling is no exception. Within their first meeting, Bruce quickly gets his ass kicked as he flirts with her, exchanging their names and having one of those weird K-drama moments where the faces of the main leads get super close and they stare into each other's eyes before backing off, to let you know that there's something bubbling between the two, because apparently there's no other way to hint towards that. Bruce is quite a see-through character from the jump. We know the type of guy he is, and although he is that type of guy, he is capable of getting shit done when shit needs doing. He has a strong sense of justice and is willing to put his life on the line for the people he cares about. And he proves this time after time by saving Fong Ling, who at first is only there to fuck Bruce over, but soon after being saved quite a few times by him, starts to lower her guard when she's around him, even to the point of teasing him with silly nicknames. Fong Ling is Bruce's Ada Wong, and Bruce is Fong Ling's Leon, though their relationship is a lot more simple and cliche as these characters only have a 3-hour game to develop it, whereas Leon and Ada's weird-ass relationship spans over several games and other Resident Evil media, and it is for the same reason that Dead Aim's characters don't really develop in any meaningful or significant way. Which sucks because I really dig Bruce as a character and would love to see him in other Resident Evil games, but I can't see that happening anytime soon. At least him and Fong Ling get a happy ending, so there's that. For such a short playtime, the story and characters are a lot more than I could hope for. Nothing about it really screams grade A shit, but coming from the previous Gun Survivor games, I definitely was expecting something more forgettable, if that makes sense. I would argue that the characters and plot in this game are almost on par with some of the mainline games, and I truly wasn't expecting that. Resident Evil Dead Aim is quite different from its predecessors when it comes to the gameplay, and I think that's for the best as those games are not good. For starters, Dead Aim ditches the first-person point of view, sort of. While you're shooting, you will be in first person just like the previous Gun Survivors. But when you're running around, the camera changes to this over-the-shoulder view. I could be wrong, but I do believe that this is the first game in the series to use this kind of camera, setting the trend that would continue until Resident Evil 7's release. You would think that constantly switching between perspectives would be quite jarring, but it is surprisingly smooth. I definitely prefer this over being stuck in first person. I can't explain it, but tankies in first person makes me want to throw up. That's how much I hate it. This game has some funky tank controls, just like Resident Evil Survivor, that don't turn as much as you would like it to turn, but at least it's a bit more tolerable in third person because it makes it a tad easier to gauge where your wide-ass turn will take you. Resident Evil Survivor had an overbearing arcade feel to it that didn't really mesh well with the Resident Evil formula. Everything that made Resident Evil at the time was either butchered or non-existent in that game. Dead Aim isn't just another off-rail light gun arcade game. I mean, it is, but it's also a fully fledged Resident Evil title in almost every way. Areas aren't as straightforward as they used to be. They're larger and more expansive, ditching the point A to point B exploration found in Survivor for a more traditional locked doors and backtracking style the series is known for, allowing you to spend more time in each area the game has to offer and take in your surroundings. And by golly does this game have some good surroundings. The lighting is dim and moody, just the way I like it, and the sound design is top notch for a horror game. The creaks and dragging footsteps that could be heard throughout the game will easily send shivers down your spine, practically forcing you to slowly inch your way through the game hoping that there isn't an enemy right around the corner, while checking behind yourself constantly. And although I'm probably making it sound slow and uneventful, it is able to balance that with the same action-filled gameplay that you get from Gun Survivor 1 through 3, it's just toned down a bit. Similar to how Resident Evil 4 sits in the middle of the action spectrum with Resident Evil 1 on one side and Resident Evil 6 on the other. It's not as slow as the classic games, but it's certainly not rambunctious either. Yeah, you're gonna get a fair amount of action in the game, but it also knows when to take it back a notch to scare you when the time is right. And sometimes you get both the spooky bits and the action at the same time. Dead Aim is kind of good at mixing things up so you don't get bored while playing. The ship and lab are just your average Resident Evil locations. Large areas filled with claustrophobic rooms that you gradually explore by way of unlocking doors, solving puzzles, and defeating bosses. Endless hallways and grandiose foyers crawling with zombies and other mutated creatures, all of which are out to kill you. This is what we've come to expect from Resident Evil games around this time. Then there are the underground and sewer areas that are more laid back. Both of these areas are not as large and fleshed out as the others, opting for a linear path of progression, with not as much backtracking and not much to fight, with the few existing enemies placed only to up the spooky factor. Just when you think you're alone in these dark, quiet sewer pipes, their torpedo moms launch their babies through the water in hopes that one of them will get the chance to sacrifice their life to kill you. Totally unexpected and very heartless of the mother. There are these frog monsters that perfectly blend in with the dark until they are ready to pounce, which causes their eyes to glow for some reason, letting you know where they are just when it's almost too late. And flamey boys who have no eyes but have super hearing, so you have to carefully walk through the tunnels hoping that one doesn't get too close and attacks, just like that other zombie game. These aren't the type of enemies that would charge right at you like normal zombies and hunters. You have to play more cautiously than you would in any other area the game throws at you, and this is exactly what was needed to keep the game from becoming stale. Resident Evil Survivor struggles with this. Even though it's a really short game, clocking in at about an hour and a half, it entirely consists of running down hallways and blasting anything that gets in your way. And yes, this is fun, but it definitely starts to wear on you during the last leg of the game. Another thing that Survivor struggled with was the lack of a clear antagonist. You could probably argue that Vincent was the game's main villain, seeing as nothing would happen without him, but he's not actively antagonistic or opposing the MC, as he kinda dies as soon as the game starts. Hypnos Tyrant is the final boss, but he's kinda just there. Memorable villains are a big part of Resident Evil's appeal. Wesker, Ramon Salazar, Mr. X, Nemesis, Lady Dimitrescu, the Ashford twins, the Baker family. The series antagonists are all pretty cool to varying degrees, and this is missing in Survivor. Luckily, Dead Aim is the bomb diggity and has a pretty interesting villain. I can't say that he is as iconic as the ones I previously mentioned, but he is certainly different from the others. Meet Morpheus, former Umbrella employee who was discharged after being blamed for causing the Raccoon City outbreak. Interesting enough, he has this crazy obsession with beauty, and it definitely shows because this motherfucker is so damn pretty. I'm talking Griffith from Berserk level pretty. He's gone under numerous operations in order to look the way he does, and as an extension of this obsession, he plans to destroy this ugly world in order to clear the way for a new and beautiful world that he would go on to create. After he injects himself with the TG virus, his appearance goes from a Sephiroth clone to Rem from Death Note with a larger cup size. Also, his feet turns into high heels. Certainly one of the more interesting enemy designs Resident Evil has to offer. I'm guessing that this is just a reflection of his strong beliefs concerning beauty, kind of influencing that mutation. In a way, by injecting himself with the virus, he has finally obtained a form of true beauty in his eyes. Morpheus, like Bruce and Fong Ling, doesn't really get any development at all, nor does his motives or ambitions really strike me as something well written or deep. Frankly, I think they're really stupid. So while I wouldn't consider Morpheus a good villain, I would say that he is certainly memorable and unique. And his fighting style is too. The TG virus basically turns him into a super fast electric type tyrant who is invincible to almost any weapon in the game. I assume Morpheus is also a part of an Olympic gymnastics team because most of his attacks consist of flips, cartwheels, and a bunch of aerial kicks. A lot of the time you spend with him would just be you running away with the sound of high heel clacks slowly getting louder, because he runs faster than you, and the rest of the time will be this. The game tells you how to get out of that, but not how to get out of that. what the hell is the escape button? I've never had to use that once before. Like, I played the game months ago and this still pisses me off for some reason. Anyway, I'm pleasantly surprised with how much I like this game. Going in, I had very low expectations, like an inch off the ground low. You can't blame me for that because Gun Survivor 1 through 3 aren't exactly what anyone would call good games, but pretty much everything else that was wrong with those games was fixed with this one to a degree. The controls for the most part are just as janky as they were before, but other than that, there are improvements all around, making it a cool game that I definitely would recommend to anyone who's into Resident Evil. On a side note, some part of me thinks this game is weirdly similar to Resident Evil 4, really only lacking the polish that 4 has, with the identical pacing and level design that gives a bit of room for exploration but ultimately is pretty linear despite what the map would suggest. The way the dialogue is written also rubs me the same way. It's just oozing with cheesy one-liners and banter. I would like to think that Resident Evil Dead Aim was somewhat of a prototype to test the direction Capcom wanted to take the series and see if fans would vibe with it before pulling the trigger with a big budget game. I understand that I'm probably gonna dislocate my shoulder by reaching this far, but I really can't think of any other reason why these two would have so many similarities. I don't know, maybe I'm just as crazy as those people who believe that fluoride is used by the government to control our minds. Anyway, play this game and stand Luna.